All right, we're going live.
Let me know when you're.
It always confuses me. So like this thing won't even say it's live. And then when I look, I see myself talking about it's not ready to go live yet. So, but we're live now.
Okay, then I'll call the select board to order. And are there any changes to the agenda?
I believe that there is a desire to have a discussion about the potential transition to the fiscal year, collecting taxes twice a year, and some of those building on what the board's been talking about. And
I
I don't
agree.
know if that would be just a general discussion thing or if you all want to add it as an actual agenda item.
Oh, I totally want it to be an actual agenda item, so let's add it. John, you okay with that?
No, I thought it was going to be. I just called
Yeah,
Owen.
I just didn't make it specific. I apologize for that.
No, I called Owen a few minutes ago and said, "Did you and Walter scrap that?" And he said, "Oh no."
Kate, greetings.
Hello, hello.
Okay, is there any public comment for items that aren't on the agenda?
There wouldn't necessarily be that ability unless someone had communicated something to me prior. I don't have any emails from folks requesting, and I'll just check YouTube very quickly. I don't, it says that one person's watching, but that person might be me. So
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, so this also isn't on the agenda, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Cliff, Jeff, and Kate. Sandra Wallace is on this call, and she is a relatively new resident of South Thomaston. And before that was a short-time resident of Thomaston. And she is interested in joining your committee. She's
Great.
been attending the select board meetings since she discovered that there was a select board. I'm not going to drain her credentials, etc., but I know she's a lawyer by profession. I think she's semi-retired. Is that right?
I'm retired.
You're retired, but you are doing some pro bono or whatever work, right?
No.
No. Oh, okay. I thought you were doing
I'm not admitted in Maine. I'm admitted other places, but it would not be smart for me to try doing legal work in Maine.
Okay. I'm going to connect her with Moira to get the rundown on this, that, and the other thing about being a budget committee member, and we're looking forward to approving or appointing her at our September 22nd meeting. So because of that, I invited her to join this this meeting tonight. So
Thanks.
welcome, and Sandra, on your screen, I think, you know John Spear,
Right.
and Kate and Camille, who's now joined. If you don't know John Spear, you elected him to succeed Cheryl Waterman in June. So he's the newest member of the select board. And Kate Green is a now almost 1 year member of the budget committee. Jeff Northgraves, who I think you probably know.
No, but for the name.
Jeff is has served as select board member, member of the budget committee, member of the planning board, member of the planning board of appeals, and I don't know. I don't think he was ever fire chief, but maybe that's in his future now that he's retired. And Camille Minicus. I pronounce it right most of the time, but is also a 1 year or last year appointee to the budget committee. And then Cliff Retzloff is also part of the new evolving committee membership. So what's interesting is that Moira and Jeff are the two veterans on this committee. Beverly St. Clair, who doesn't appear to have joined, is also relatively new to the committee, but she was a select board member in Thomaston. So she, and grew up in South Thomaston, so she kind of knows the ropes. So those are your potential colleagues, and hope you continue with this process, and we get to appoint you on September 22nd.
Well, happy to meet you all.
Likewise.
Welcome. And sometimes Jeff doesn't have that unbelievably great beard that he has now. Jeff?
He's gone full Jay Leno on us since he retired, right?
Looks wonderful.
Hey, Cliff, how you doing?
Not Jay Leno. Who was the guy that grew the beard? The other one with the glasses. Letterman.
Okay, well, so why don't we
I knew what
start
you
with the change that we made to the agenda? The board, I don't think we've officially voted on this, but you should know that the consensus, certainly, of the select board is that we're going to aggressively move forward to change the fiscal year to a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year. That we aspire to have that become effective on July 1st of 2021. At the same time, we will be asking the town for an advisory opinion on this idea. For those of you, the budget committee members, the select board could do this on its own with a two to one vote, but we would rather have broad-based support for the idea. So our thought process so far is to do a lot of education on this subject and then have a special town meeting in November where we do an advisory warrant article on the fiscal year change, and that we also let the town know that along with that would be 2 times a year tax collection. Our thought process right now is October 1st and April 1st. So bill and collect twice a year. And along with this, we will also be proposing that we do secret ballot for the election of select board members, school board members, and any other elected officials that fall under that general umbrella. I don't think there are any, though, in our town. Is that right, John?
No.
So comments, John, on this? Am I capturing kind of what we're thinking about?
Yeah, again, we haven't voted on anything, but I think we're pretty much in agreement that we want to see where the town stands on this. And we'd obviously like I think the budget committee to be aware of what we're proposing. I think the biggest impact it's going to have on the budget committee is you're going to have to put together, or we're going to have to put together along with the budget committee, an 18-month budget for the first transitional year. There's 2 ways you can do it. You can do a 6-month budget or an 18-month. The advice we've been getting from everybody is don't do a 6-month. It's too many tax bills and liens and blah, blah, blah. It's too crazy. It's too short. So that would probably be the biggest impact on the budget committee, is we're going to have to put together an 18-month budget and review that with the budget committee. And like Walter says, the select board could change the fiscal year on its own, but I think we're reluctant to do that without an advisory vote of the town. The going to a secret ballot, which means that would also happen in June, the election of municipal officers and school board. And you also could put a referendum question on if you wanted to. That would make that clear for some particular item where you wanted a large input. But that does require a vote of the town. And then the tax bill collection is actually something that has to be sent really every year. But we would certainly propose that changing the fiscal year sort of hangs together with the two tax bills. So, but of course, town meeting could do what it wanted 10 years from now in terms of they could collect taxes 3 times a year if they wanted to. So, but yeah, I think that's where we're at.
And this is from my, this is a question from me, and I'm sorry I don't know the answer. And John, I'll look to you and Jeff as a veteran. In my prior life, as a budget committee member in Massachusetts, were the select board to do something like, propose something like this, they would go out to relevant boards and ask them to vote yes or no in terms of approval. Is that something that's done here or frowned upon or unique? Because my thought process is prior to the town meeting, special town meeting that we're thinking of holding, if it's appropriate, I'd ask the budget committee to vote yes or no, and so that we have their recommendation or their validation or approval of this idea. If you think that's inappropriate in South Thomaston and not appropriate or not legal in Maine, I'm fine to back off from that. It's just something from my past.
Well, I'll let Jeff speak to it too, but certainly in the past, I know the planning board has made recommendations regarding, say, ordinance changes or something. And the budget committee certainly makes recommendations regarding financial articles. Whether or not we want to sort of step over into policy issues with the budget committee, I'm not sure, but I don't think it's illegal. But I don't know if Jeff, if you have any thoughts on that either. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it until you posed it, so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't see anything wrong, especially on something like changing our fiscal year, of getting a vote by the budget committee when you take it to town. I think that's appropriate. I don't think it's required, and it's definitely not illegal.
Okay. All right. So I'll kick this to Moira and have her work it out with you guys. Is that fair?
Yeah, Walter, could I ask one
Sure.
question? And I
Yeah.
guess
Oh, can I make a suggestion? And I'm sorry that I'm talking too much. I'm having a bad month, man. I've mismanaged 2 select board meetings plus 7 revisions of the spreadsheet you're going to see later, which is why it's so late. If you're familiar with Zoom, if you can use the raised hand function, that would help us not talking over each other. Go ahead, Cliff.
That'd be perfect. I guess this is more of a question I'd have for Camille because of her accounting background. Every company, and I've never worked with a municipality like here that's changing the year, but I've been in 2 corporations where we moved fiscal years, and we've always had a stub year rather than an 18-month year. And I didn't know whether we should, and you probably don't want that input right now, but I'd be interested in Camille's thoughts on that if she had any experience in that in the financial area, because every corporation I did a stub year.
You're muted, Camille.
There you go.
I clicked the wrong thing to unmute. Cliff, I didn't really understand. Did you say like a short year as opposed to an 18-month year? Was that what you're?
Yeah, we did a step like General Mills. We did a stub year for 6 months, and then we came back. So we didn't have a 18-month thing. Now again, we were being a public company. We didn't want to confuse the investment community.
Mhm.
So we just had a stub year. It was a 6 month year.
I think that would be up to one. I think we should see if it's even if anyone's agreeable to the change. I just look at it as just math. You know, to me, it's like I go out 6 months, or you go 6 months and then go a year. To me, I don't see that much difference on it. So I think we should see if there's a precedent from any other towns and go from there.
Yeah, John, I think you know you have done some work on this. So
Yeah, I have. There it is. You can do 2 years under the excuse me. You can choose either method under the law, 6 months or 18 months. The advice we've gotten from everybody is do not do a 6 month, because it gets so confusing with the tax bills and the tax liens, because you're issuing liens for delinquent taxes, and you know, and gets immensely confusion. I don't want to get down into the weeds on what we've heard, but I strongly, the strong advice we've gotten is to stay away from the 6 months. And from what I understand, 99% of the towns have, at least in recent years, have gone with the 18 months process.
Anybody else?
I have just a quick thing, Walter. I have the budget committee policy in front of me. Number 4 under powers and duties reads to make such other recommendations on fiscal matters as it may from time to time deem advisable. And then below that, the committee's authority shall be advisory only. Any recommendations on a matter requiring town meeting action shall be printed with the article in the warrant and on the ballot, if any, along with other such recommendations.
Okay, good. I always like to get as many fingerprints on the crime as possible. That's a joke. Okay.
Oh, if I could just say,
Go ahead.
I would think in terms of presenting it to the town, that if you had a budget committee recommendation in favor of whatever you decide, that'll give a lot of people some comfort that the people who do the crunching of the numbers and all have thought about it, and they're suggesting that we go with this.
Which is why I raised it to begin with. Thank you for that. John.
Yeah, actually, we talked at length with John Fowler, who's a longtime town manager down in St. George, and he was there. He's former town manager now. He was there when they went through this change. I can't remember when he said it was, 1990 sometime or 2004. And actually down there, the budget committee was sort of instrumental in initiating it and sort of pushing for it, for lack of a better word, according to John. So I found that interesting.
Equally interesting was that John himself was against the idea at the beginning.
Right.
Okay, let me just close this discussion off with one other thing. The discussions that we've had so far, the sense is that we'll do some at least one public information session in October, and we'll be heading for a special town meeting in November. So again, that's just kind of our thought process right now, and we'll probably affirm or confirm that. We're meeting now twice a month for certainly for the balance of 2020. So we have another meeting. Our next meeting is September 22nd. So,
Could I just say one other quick thing? The reason we're thinking about November is because December is a terrible time for a special town meeting. And you've got to hold this special meeting 90 days before your annual town meeting, which has always been in March. So that's why we're focusing on November. The law requires that if you're going to make a change, it has to be done at a meeting held at least 90 days before your meeting.
right now, if everything is approved in November, then the annual town meeting will occur in June of 2021. But we have to operate under the assumption that that March is going to be the town meeting for 2021 until we change it. Okay, any further questions before we move on to ostensibly the primary subject of this meeting? Okay.
Just super, maybe this isn't the time for it, but I was just reading over the budget committee policy again, and just something for the budget committee to mull over, and also the select board. The way that I read this policy is, even if we had a quorum of budget committee members right now, we couldn't have their meeting convene because the chairperson
They don't have a chair.
Yeah, and we don't, their policy doesn't speak to a vice chair. It only does secretary and chair. So just something to think about in the future. If we find situations like this, having a vice chair to call the meeting would be appropriate.
All right, can you share the financials? Okay, so I'm going to cover expenses. I'll make some comments about revenue, but mostly, I'll lead into John's discussion of revenues as well, because he's done something that is of long-term value and long overdue. Bottom line on the budget is that we have little or no known budget overrun risk that we can't compensate for. However, the spending to actual that you see, the 758,801 versus a budget of 1,584,843, is misleadingly positive. And the reason for that is that in October, we will transfer from operating funds $213,179 to reserves. And in December, we will pay debt service at $62,084. That's false favorability. We do have a couple of sub-accounts which are risky. We've had to overspend or are running against spending on supplies that are mostly PPE equipment, masks, sanitizers, et cetera, related to COVID. The more important one is that the ambulance service has had to do mandatory training, number one, but they also have to put in place what's called an OIC, an officer in charge, which is has to be a person higher ranking than the EMTs. The good news is that both of those expense categories are likely, if not absolutely, reimbursable by FEMA. So we may run up against or overrun the budget in those cases, but we should be reimbursed. Moira brought up to me the unclassified public safety account of 92.5% consumed. But the reason for that is that we've paid the full $51,000+ of dispatch fees already, which is the bulk of that budget, plus $2,000 to the animal shelter and 2/3 or 1/2 of Betty's stipend. So that 92.5%, we're not looking at an overrun in that account. Can you scroll up a little bit so I can see my notes? Okay. We haven't spent any material amount on Island Road. Permitting is in process. We have one hurdle to clear, which has to do with Maine Coast Seafood, to get them to agree with the land swap that's going on there. And given how late it is in the year, it's likely that the bulk of paving and construction in that project is going to roll over into 2021. And we also have not received a word, yes or no, on the tennis court matching grant. So if we don't get it, we won't spend it. And if we do get it, we're also late in the year. Finally, we have exercised our borrowing authority with Machias, I think, to the tune of $560,000. That all of that is Machias. Is that right, Owen? Recall that for the last several years, we've settled the TANs, covered our cash flow issues by borrowing from ourselves, but the combination of the ambulance, and twice applying undesignated funds to reduce the tax rate has meant that we don't have the reserve capability to borrow from ourselves at 1.5%. So we have to borrow from Machias at 2.85 or 2.75.
Walter, if I could just kind of building on the previous conversation that we had, just to maybe you could expand upon this, but one of the other reasons, in addition to all the things that were discussed before, is transitioning to the fiscal year. Collecting taxes twice a year does help us with cash flow, which is the hope of moving away from needing to do any sort of TANs from other outside financial institutions, and that this is the first time in I think most people's memories that the town has had to borrow from a financial institution, and primarily driven, yes, in part by municipal budget increases, but primarily because of the school. That's not throwing the school under the bus, that they go through their process and the citizens approve that as well. But just over time, our increases in cash on hand have not kept up with the school payments, which is what got us to this point. If we collected taxes twice a year, that would minimize that.
Thank you. Good points. So before we move off of expenditures, are there any questions or comments from the attendees? Okay, hearing none. John, do you want to cover all of revenue, or do you want me to make any comments before you do?
I don't care. If you want to have some opening comments, go ahead, and then I'll pick up one detail.
Okay, well, just first of all, John has done something that's going to be of long-lasting value here, which is to format our revenues in a way that's not reflected in our TRIO, which is our financial management system way, and it separates revenues into general fund revenues, which for the budget committee, Jeff knows this certainly, but everybody else has been through this only once. We have general fund revenues that when we craft the budget, these are revenues that offset budget items or fund budget items that we know about. And then when we do the tax commitment, we have a number of items, state share, the homestead reimbursement, BETE, which is business tax exemption, business equipment tax exemption, that reduce our commitment. The things that are on the watch list right now are, it's pretty clear that our ambulance billings, which had dramatically risen over the last 2 years because calls had risen, and because Amy knew how to code the forms that it takes to get billings, that's stalled. And it's stalled because calls are way down this year, and they're way down in every ambulance service in Mid-Coast, every ambulance service in the state, and probably in the country, because people are not calling the ambulance because I guess people are more afraid to go to the hospital when they're sick than just to gut it out. We did have 28 calls in August, which is I think the highest total number year to date. So there may be some pickup there. I hate to think about an ambulance call as a revenue opportunity because it means somebody is sick. But so we're going to underachieve the $70,000. The likelihood is we're going to underachieve auto excise as well, although that's catch up. People should be coming in and registering their cars and paying the excise tax. But I think it's also clear that there might not be as many new purchases as we're used to. So my only two comments are those two risk items. And John, I'll let you talk about how you formatted revenues and what you see.
Okay, I just took a stab at this actually this morning, so it's not that polished, but I just basically have separated. I think there's some confusion about different types of revenues. Some of the revenues are actually budgeted revenues and impact the municipal budget. And some of the other revenues that we get, could you scroll down just a little bit, Owen? Are what are known as commitment reducing revenues. And those are actually revenues that we footnote them. The budget committee footnoted them, if you will, on the bottom of the revenue sheet, but they're not actually part of the budget per se. And as a matter of fact, the homestead reimbursement and the Betty, you wouldn't know that amount. You can kind of project it. And when you actually set the mill rate, you come up with the number forces, the software forces you to come up with a fixed number. So for example, with homestead reimbursement, the projection back in January was 80,000. But it's actually, when you set the mill rate, when we set the mill rate, the form generated a number of 121,419. And that even gets a little further complicated because that is another reason we should be going to fiscal year, because that's the amount based on the state's fiscal year. But then we end up having to use that number in order to set our commitment to make the taxes. So, and the same thing happens with Betty. It's obviously a whole different order of magnitude. I think that was originally projected at $600. So I just find that that's kind of an easier way to think about this. And then also the other two items that are technically not in the budget, but are again on that footnote, are down below. They're veterans reimbursement and tree growth. They're not technically commitment reducing, and I debated whether I should put them up above, which I'm now, the more I think about it, the more I think I should. But anyways, and then there's a few revenues that we've collected that we didn't budget at all. The most significant one being someone made a payment in lieu of taxes. I assume some nonprofit in town, and we didn't budget for that. And that's obviously something to budget for, because difficult to budget for, because one never knows if you're going to get that or not. So anyways, I'm trying to come up with a format that explains the difference in those types of revenues. And I thought that this did a pretty good job at illustrating that. I think it still needs some tweaking, but it's getting there. Walter kind of hit on the major revenues, the excise tax. Although I did notice, Owen, that we had a pretty good jump in August. So perhaps that's, I think it was 49. Oh, I can't, let me see if I have it right here. Thought I did now, of course I can't, yeah. According to the report you gave us, it was 49,305 for the month of August, which is a pretty good jump. If we continue that, we may be okay there. But again, that's difficult to project at this point in time. So I guess the last thing that I'd like to say is there's a little bit of confusion at the meeting last night, the select board meeting, about taxes, real estate taxes as a revenue, and I didn't include them here, but under Gatsby, which is the government accounting standards policy or whatever, which is what we're forced to go by in terms of, mandated to go by in terms of accounting practices. When you commit taxes, they are recognized as a revenue 100% at that point in time. And so if you look at the TRIO report that Owen sent out, attached as backup to this, and I believe the budget committee members got it too, you'll see there's nothing collected in the current month. And that's because if you add up the 4009, and I'm trying to show it with my cursor, I guess I can't do that. Under the year to date, with the personal property taxes down below the 17,000, that's the total of our tax commitment, and that's showing that we've actually, this report is showing that we have collected that revenue, which is not technically true. We don't have the cash in hand, but again, under this governmental accounting standards, once you commit them, they're recognized as revenues. We do need on the TRIO report to make some changes here. The budget number needs to be entered over in the left column, and that would help things out. And also, Owen and I are having a discussion about the TAN proceeds. My opinion is they shouldn't be in the revenue page. They're not a revenue. The journal, as I understand it, is a debit to cash and a credit to either a short-term debt payable or TAN payable, because that's actually a liability, not an asset, because we owe that money back to the bank. So anyways, we're working on some of that stuff. But I guess I'll, at this point, I don't want to get too down in the weeds here, but I'll just open it up to questions, if anybody has any.
Can I just make one comment before we do that?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, we have our real estate tax collections are $1,089,000 and some change so far. And I think one of the footnotes that I said was that our largest escrow holder releases their funds in mid-September, and then we'll see where we are on doomsday date of October 1st. But questions, comments from the board members, the committee members?
Hey, John, that TAN item that's in there for as a revenue, I think that may have been appropriate when we were borrowing from ourselves. So it was money we were paying ourselves in lieu of the interest that money would have earned if we hadn't borrowed it. So, but I agree with you, if we're actually going out for a TAN, it would not be a revenue line. It would be a cost rather than a revenue.
It wasn't in there back when I was on the board before, and I spoke with Terry, and she said that it wasn't in there then. Owen tells me that the auditor recommended that. I said that, but I'm wondering if she misunderstood the question or something. I don't know, but I actually looked up. There are several municipal accounting handbooks out there, and I actually looked up that specific question. And so anyways, I'm talking with Owen about that. The other thing that I would say now that I think about it too is I think in terms of the Betty and the homestead, those shouldn't have been entered in the budget column until we actually did the commitment. So I think I don't know if it was Phil or not. I'm not sure who did it, but I think that jumped the gun a little bit there, and I think those need to be adjusted. And then this will come more into line with it'll look a lot better than, because if you look at the bottom line right now, it looks like way out of whack with the budget. So
yeah.
Couple of quick things if I could. Yeah, anything that Phil enters is based on what I've asked him to do. And so, between he and I, we're continually trying to get this process better. It was, difficult the first budget go around, and we're trying to learn from how we've done it in the past to make it better in the future. But just real quick on the TAN stuff, I don't disagree with what anyone has said. The only thing I'll bring up is the only reference to TANs in our municipal budget or anything that we've done has been in TAN interest payback. And so because we had borrowed from ourselves and then repaid ourselves back, it was a little bit more of like internal sub-accounting,
Right.
and not something that made its way into the budget process itself. So that's one of the main reasons, if not the exclusive reason, why we needed to plop a new TAN proceed line somewhere into TRIO, because we just never had to do that before. And yeah, I mean, this is, we reach out to the auditor, we ask for advice, we put it there. And one of the things Phil and I have talked about is as much as Phil knows about TRIO and how we budget and all the finance stuff, sometimes there's a little bit of miscommunication between him and the auditor. And so what I've asked is that every time a new line, kind of based on what the select board asked the other night, anytime there's any sort of new line creation or shifting of funds from one line to another, that it be done in consultation with me, primarily to display the policy end of it, you know, the bigger, broader context, because sometimes the nuances of a financial move play more into what we're trying to accomplish than just simply saying we're getting TAN proceeds or we're getting money. Okay, we'll plop it into revenues. So that's something we're going to start doing going forward.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions? You can, unless we need it, you can get rid of the screen share so we can
Yep.
see
And
everybody.
it is right ready for me to grab. So if there's, you know, reference that you want to go back to it or any other documents that you need for the remainder of your conversation, just let me know.
Okay. Questions, comments? Dum-dum that we're doing? Smart things that we're doing? I forgot to put this in context. For the last 3 years, Moira and I have always set up a half-year review in July or early August at the time that we set the mill rate. Obviously, the whole schedule got knocked out of kilter this year, which is why we're here tonight. So we'll get back on track. Any closing comments? Yeah, Owen.
Just and if you already covered this in the beginning when I was checking emails, I apologize, but all the funding of reserves is something that we do after October. So that's why that line is just zero across the board.
Yeah.
Walter, I mentioned that.
Okay.
Yeah, and one thing that this is actually for you, the select board and you, Owen, is that so in debt service last year, we incorporated the $36,500 repayment to the reserves that we borrowed to fund the ambulance. At the end of the year, that has to be divvied up amongst those reserve accounts, and they have to be paid back. And I don't know the mechanism. I haven't figured out what the mechanism to do that is, but that's just something to put on our do list. Either as of December 31st or first part of the new year. I'm not sure what the right accounting treatment ought to be.
Just as a stab at it, we would likely do it in the same fell swoop that we do all of the reason behind doing it at the beginning of October is October 1st is when all taxes are due. October 2nd interest occurs. And so that's why we're like a wash in cash in the beginning of October. And so we move and pay everything back. We fund everything. We take all this money, we put it into its proper place, including the funding of all of our reserve accounts. And then we use any remaining to cover expenses, cash flow, school payments, et cetera, until we exhaust all that. And then we had to go, you know, historically back to the borrowing from ourselves to manage cash flow until we're awash with cash again.
Okay. Everybody okay? All right. Go ye forth and watch the Chiefs and the Texans if you're so inclined. Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna
last parting thing.
vote.
If a budget committee member has something, anyone else has something that comes up later on upon review, please feel free to email me. Happy to send you supplemental information. This office is always open to answer questions.
Do I have a motion to adjourn the select board?
I was going to say, do you want a motion to adjourn the select board?
I have to have one.
I move that we adjourn the select board meeting.
I select your motion. I second your motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Aye.
and welcome to the new budget committee members.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks, everyone.